Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? This time, we're tackling pragmatism.
Pragmatism.
Yeah. Now, I know what you might be thinking.
Yeah.
Pragmatism, isn't that like a super boring, dry philosophy?
Right.
But trust me on this one. It's way more interesting than it sounds.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at some sources on pragmatism, and what we're going to try to find out is how this really unique American philosophy has kind of shaped, well, everything. I mean, we're
hmm
talking science, education, the way we think about truth.
Yeah. When you really get down to it, it's a shift away from just thinking about theories, abstract ideas.
Yeah.
And it's more about what happens when you actually apply those theories. Like, what are the real world
Just
consequences?
about what works, right?
Exactly. It's not about just sitting around debating what's true in some like big philosophical sense.
Right.
It's about asking, okay, but does it actually work? Like, does this idea help us solve problems? Does it make a difference?
That's a great way to put it. Going through the sources you sent, I was really struck by how much pragmatism seems like tailor-made for, people who like to get things done,
For sure.
people who are all about results, and making things happen in the real world.
Yeah, it's very action oriented.
Totally. So let's dive into that a bit.
Uh-huh.
What does it really mean to say truth is what works? Like, how did that idea even come about?
Well, to understand pragmatism, you kind of have to picture America in the late 1800s.
Okay.
Like, think rapid change, huge industrial growth, tons of scientific breakthroughs happening all the
It
time.
was a really dynamic time.
Oh, yeah, super dynamic. And people weren't so interested in just, sitting around having these abstract debates anymore.
No, they were busy building stuff.
Exactly. They wanted solutions, they wanted progress, they wanted to see tangible results.
So pragmatism was kind of a reaction against all that,
Okay.
right? Like those old, stuffy European philosophies that didn't seem to fit with this new American spirit.
You got it. Thinkers like William James and John Dewey, they were all about making philosophy relevant to their lives, to the actual problems and opportunities they were facing.
That's so interesting. So it really is this uniquely American philosophy.
Oh, absolutely. And it's reflected in one of the core principles of pragmatism, which is, get ready for it, anti-foundationalism.
Anti-foundationalism. Okay, you got to break that one down for me.
Haha, no problem. Basically, it means that pragmatists don't believe knowledge is built on some kind of absolute, unchanging foundation.
Okay, so it's not about finding these like ultimate truths that never change.
Nope. They believe our understanding of the world is constantly changing, evolving based on what we experience and the experiments we conduct.
So it's more about constantly testing and adapting.
Yeah. Embracing uncertainty, being open to revising our understanding as we learn more.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So it really does tie back to this idea of truth being what works, right? It's about being willing to update your understanding, to be flexible.
Exactly. It's not about clinging to rigid beliefs, but about constantly testing and refining what we know.
I'm starting to see how this could apply to so many different areas of life. I mean, science is a perfect example, right?
Absolutely.
The scientific method is all about testing, observing, and refining your theories based on the results. It's pragmatism in action.
Right. And we see it in education, too. Think about John Dewey.
Oh yeah, John Dewey, he was a big name in pragmatism, right?
Huge. And he had these, like, revolutionary ideas about education.
Yeah, he was all about learning by doing, wasn't he?
Exactly. He thought, why are we making kids just passively sit there and absorb info from textbooks?
Right.
It should be active, hands-on experimental.
So get out there, get your hands dirty, make some mistakes, and actually learn from the process.
Exactly. Dewey believed that real learning happens through experience, through actually grappling with problems and figuring things out for yourself.
That's amazing. I mean, it's incredible to think how his ideas, based on this, like homegrown American philosophy, have influenced education for generations.
It really shows you how powerful pragmatism is. It's not just about abstract philosophy, it has real-world impact.
Absolutely. And that impact goes way beyond just science and education. We see it everywhere. But we'll have to save that for part two. I mean, it's wild to think that these ideas are, what, over 100 years old? And they're still so relevant today.
Oh, totally. It's like pragmatism was built for this crazy, fast-paced world we live in.
Right, where everything's always changing and you got to be able to adapt and like roll with the punches.
Totally. Like, think about technology, right?
Oh, perfect example.
I mean, the tech world changes so quickly. You have to be constantly learning, experimenting, updating, or you get left behind.
It's all about like testing things out, getting feedback, making tweaks, and just like constantly improving, right?
Exactly. That's the pragmatic mindset. It's not about getting it perfect the first time. It's about being open to learning and evolving along the way. And that same idea applies to so many other parts of
Oh,
life,
yeah, I could see that.
like personal growth, or social change even.
Hmm.
Pragmatism says, embrace that growth mindset. See challenges as learning opportunities. And it's like, always be looking for ways to improve things.
Yeah, it makes me think about how we make decisions, too. Like, sometimes we can get so caught up in analyzing every possible outcome,
Yeah.
and we just end up stuck.
Oh, analysis paralysis. Yeah, I've been there.
Totally. So I'm wondering, could pragmatism help us with that? Like, could it help us make decisions more effectively?
I think so. Because pragmatism is all about moving beyond just theory.
Yeah.
It wants us to look at what could actually happen as a result of our choices.
So instead of obsessing over every little thing that could go wrong,
Yeah.
it's more about like weighing the pros and cons, making the best choice you can, and then like see what happens.
Yeah. Exactly. And being open to changing course if things aren't working out the way you planned. It's about learning from mistakes and using that to make better decisions next time.
I like that. It takes some of the pressure off.
It does, because it says, hey, it's okay to not have all the answers right away.
Right.
It's about being willing to try things out and see what happens. Sometimes that's the best way to figure out what works.
This is making me realize how often I get stuck in that perfectionism trap.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Like, I want to make sure everything is just right before I do anything.
I get it. But the thing about pragmatism is that it's not about perfection. It's about progress.
Right. It's about constantly experimenting, tweaking, getting better over time.
Exactly. And that can be really empowering because it means you don't have to wait until everything is perfect to start taking action.
Okay, this is all sounding pretty awesome. But I got to ask, are there any, like, downsides to pragmatism? Because it can't all be sunshine and roses, right?
Right. I mean, like any philosophy, pragmatism has had its share of criticism, and some of it is, totally fair. We've talked about how pragmatism emphasizes results, like truth is what works. But some people worry that that could lead to relativism. Like, does that mean anything goes as long as you get the outcome you want?
Yeah, that's a good point. What about ethics? I mean, could pragmatism be used to justify, like, doing something unethical if it seems to work in the short term?
That's a common critique. But pragmatists would say that's a misunderstanding of the philosophy.
Oh.
It's not about abandoning your morals. It's about understanding that judging something's effectiveness, that should include thinking about the ethical implications, the long-term consequences. It's about making sure your solutions work in a good way, not just achieving some result no matter what.
So it's like it's not a free pass to be a jerk just because you're getting what you want, right?
No, not at all. It's about finding solutions that are both effective and ethical.
Right, so there needs to be a balance. Like, you got to be practical, but you also need to have a strong moral compass.
Exactly. And that means being willing to have those tough conversations about your values and what really matters.
I'm thinking about, like, big social issues, like poverty or climate change. If we approach those with a purely pragmatic mindset, like just focus on quick fixes, we could end up ignoring the long-term consequences. We could end up harming people or the planet.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to use pragmatism responsibly. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for, well, not so good.
Right. So the key is to be pragmatic, but also to be thoughtful, to keep our ethics in check.
You got it. It's about using our intelligence and our creativity to solve problems in a way that actually makes the world better for everyone.
This is making me see pragmatism in a whole new light. It's not just about getting things done, it's about making the world a better place.
Right. Pragmatism is about progress, but it's also about justice.
Okay, I'm really starting to get it now. But before we move on, I have one more question. We've been talking about how pragmatism is all about adapting and changing. But doesn't that mean it's kind of like wishy-washy? Like, doesn't it lack a core set of values or principles?
That's a really common question, and it makes sense, right? Because if it's all about what works, it might seem like there's no real substance there.
Right. Like anything goes.
Well, actually, pragmatism is rooted in some pretty fundamental values.
Okay.
Like, at its heart, it's committed to things like truth, fairness, and helping people live better lives.
So it's not just about what works, it's about what works to make the world a better place, a more just place. Right?
Exactly. It's about using our knowledge and experience to solve problems, but to do it in a way that aligns with our values.
Wow, this has been like a total mind-blowing deep dive.
It has been pretty interesting, hasn't it?
Seriously, though, I feel like we've gotten a good handle on not just what pragmatism is, but how we can actually, like, use it. But sometimes with philosophy, it can feel kind of, I don't know, heady, like all these big ideas, but like, how do I make this real in my everyday life, you know?
I know exactly what you mean. And that was something the pragmatists were worried about, too. They didn't want pragmatism to just be this thing you talk about, you know?
Yeah, no ivory tower stuff.
No way. They wanted it to be applicable, like something that could actually make a difference in how people live their lives.
So how do we do that? How do we go from just, understanding pragmatism to actually being more pragmatic?
Well, my advice would be to start small. Don't try to change everything about how you think all at once.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Instead, think about a specific challenge you're facing and try applying some of these principles to that.
Okay, I like that. That's manageable.
Right. So, for example, we talked about pragmatism and the whole learning by doing thing,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that was fascinating.
Well, let's say you want to learn something new. Let's say photography.
Okay, yeah, I've always wanted to get better at taking pictures.
Perfect example. Now, a lot of people would get stuck in the research phase, reading all the books, trying to find the absolute best camera before they even start.
Oh, that's totally me.
Right. But a pragmatist would say, hey, just grab your phone and start snapping photos.
Just go for it, even if I don't know what I'm doing.
Exactly. It's about embracing that you're not going to be an expert right away. It's about being okay with making mistakes and learning as you go.
That's such a good point. I think I hold myself back a lot because I want to be good at something right from the start.
It's a common trap. Our culture is so focused on perfection, but pragmatism is about progress, not perfection.
Right.
It's about constantly experimenting, tweaking, getting a little bit better each time.
So in the photography example, it's not about taking the perfect photo right away. It's about taking a bunch of photos, seeing what works, what doesn't, and like learning from that.
You got it. And that approach, that applies to, well, almost everything.
Oh, it's pretty powerful.
Work projects, personal goals, even like tough conversations. The pragmatic approach says, try step out, see what happens. Don't be afraid to mess up.
Oh, that's making me think about this conflict I've been having with a coworker. I've been so focused on being right,
Yeah.
But maybe I should take a step back and be like, okay, what if I tried this? What if I approach it from this angle? What would happen then?
There you go. That's
Yeah.
exactly what a pragmatist would do. You're shifting the focus from being right to finding a solution.
And maybe in the process, I'll come up with something I wouldn't have even thought of otherwise.
Exactly. Pragmatism is all about opening up possibilities, finding creative ways to solve problems, which is something you can't always do when you're stuck in rigid thinking.
I'm really inspired by this.
Yeah.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening.
I'm so glad to hear that. And if there's one thing I hope people take away from this deep dive, it's that pragmatism isn't just a philosophy, it's a way of living. It's about embracing experience, trying new things, and always being willing to learn and grow.
That's such a great way to put it. Pragmatism is about taking action, being willing to experiment, and just trying to make things better, even if it's just a little bit at a time.
Absolutely. And remember, it's okay to not have all the answers right away. It's about being willing to learn and adapt as you go.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with me and with our listeners.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into pragmatism. We hope it's inspired you to try out some of these ideas in your own life.
Keep experimenting.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep making the world a better place.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.